My name is Patrick McCabe. I've always had incredibly poor dental health. My teeth were atrociously bad. Because of this, among other reasons, I had my wisdom teeth extracted quite late in life. Most individuals undergo this procedure either during high school or, at the very latest, in their early college years. However, my situation was different. I didn't even schedule a consultation until after I had graduated from college. The process itself was excruciatingly painful, easily one of the most irritating experiences I've ever endured. I won't bore you with the intricate details of my recovery, but there's a crucial piece of information you need to know. For some unexplained reason, the pain became so severe that I couldn't manage to sleep through the night without the aid of painkillers. I devised a system where I would rouse myself every 3 hours to take another pill, alternating between the two medications I had been prescribed. It was terrible, but it was my only recourse to prevent the intense toothaches that would, quite literally, reduce me to tears. It goes without saying that my sleep schedule during that period was utterly chaotic. My body became accustomed to 3-hour sleep cycles, followed by periods of wakefulness, making it difficult to revert to a normal routine, even after my recovery was complete. That, honestly, was the worst part. The sleep deprivation. It was profoundly unnatural. I tell you, after a while, I didn't even feel human. It was as if I had transformed into something else, constantly waking up and drifting back to sleep. I shudder to even recall it. One particular night, I believe it was during the initial week of my recovery, I woke around 4 a.m. to take my medication again. For reasons unknown, I found myself unable to fall back asleep afterward. I'm not sure if it was my condition or the fact that the air conditioning had ceased functioning, but my room was oppressively hot, far hotter than usual. I remember restlessly tossing and turning for about 10 minutes before deciding I needed to address the heat. The only solution I could think of was to open my bedroom window, which I promptly did. This provided some minor relief, but I still couldn't sleep. So I lay there miserably in bed, fervently wishing with every fiber of my being that I would just drift off. But of course, I didn't. At some point, I began to notice a peculiar noise emanating from outside my window. I never slept with my window open, so initially I assumed it was just a typical outdoor sound that I wasn't accustomed to hearing. Yet, the longer I listened, the more I felt it wasn't a normal sound. It resembled a scratching noise, as if an animal were dragging its claws across a surface. That's the best description I can offer. Eventually, the sound intensified, and I realized it seemed to be coming from directly above me, from the roof. A few seconds later, the noise began to move, gradually fading out of earshot. At this point, I was fairly certain it was some sort of creature romping on the roof. My family resides in a wooded area, so we've had our share of inquisitive raccoons and pest incursions. I truly wanted to simply ignore it and go back to sleep, but I knew my dad would be furious if something burrowed into our attic again. Thus, I felt compelled to act. Besides, I wasn't on the verge of falling asleep anyway. I was wide awake. So, without much deliberation, I cast off my covers, leaped out of bed, and made my way to the garage. From there, I retrieved one of my dad's heavy-duty flashlights and then walked back through the house to the back door. My room is situated on the first floor near the rear of the house, where the roof is lowest, so I decided to check that area first. I reached the spot outside my bedroom window and began sweeping the flashlight beam across the roof. I saw nothing up there, so I sighed, concluding that the animal had likely relocated to a different part of the roof in the time it took me to get outside. I started walking around the house, attempting to illuminate as much of the roof as possible. All I really needed to do was scare the animal away, which would be straightforward if I could just locate the darn thing. I was scanning near the front of the house, where the roof is nearly twice as high, when I noticed something shift in the edge of my flashlight beam. With a swift flick of my wrist, I directed the flashlight toward the area where I had seen movement and almost passed out. Standing on the roof was a person, not an animal, not a pack of animals, but a fully grown human being. There was a naked human being on my roof, frozen in the beam of my flashlight. I screamed. I couldn't help it, and the instant I did, the person on the roof began to move, almost as if they were repelled by the light of my flashlight. I tried to follow their movements with the light, but they were incredibly fast. Until that moment, I hadn't realized it was possible to move so quickly barefoot, particularly on the loose shingles of an uneven roof. They started making their way back toward my room, and I sprinted around the house to intercept them. I don't even know what I was thinking. I should have just run back inside, but some deep instinct within me prevented me from retreating. I yelled for my dad as I ran, hoping he would emerge in time to help me ward off or restrain the lunatic on our roof. I reached the back of the house just in time to see the person preparing to leap off the roof. My initial thought was that it was impossible. There was absolutely no way a person could jump off that roof without sustaining severe injuries, even from that lower point. Surely they'd have to find another way down. But without hesitation, the person jumped, hitting the concrete with a deafening thump. The shock of what I was witnessing had me frozen in place at that moment. I couldn't even process what was happening because it was so utterly insane that someone had actually just jumped off our roof. I don't know how he didn't shatter every bone in his legs. My stunned shock only lasted a split second, but that was enough. The person immediately rose from the paver stones and charged toward me, tackling me to the ground. He began clawing at my eyes, almost as if he were trying to rip my face off. I screamed and kicked, but I couldn't get him off me. He was grunting and spitting, and there was no logical explanation for how someone like that could possess such immense strength. I started to feel blood pouring down my face, and in that moment, I genuinely believed I was going to die. But then, over the sound of my own screaming, I heard the back door burst open. Seconds later, my dad was pulling the person off me, cursing and yelling as if his life depended on it. I got up off the ground just in time to see that madman break free of my dad's grasp, completely covered in my blood. Instead of continuing to attack me or my dad, he ran to the edge of our yard, scaled our backyard fence, and vanished into the darkness. My dad and I stood there in shock as the sounds of his footsteps crashing through the forest faded into the distance. I'll fast forward through the rest. I had to go to the hospital that night. My dad almost got us into an accident just trying to get me there. I had lost a significant amount of blood, and the doctors had to give me all sorts of injections to prevent any infections or diseases that individual might have been carrying. It was a nightmare. The only silver lining was that my mouth was practically untouched, so my teeth didn't require re-examination. The police were useless. Not that they could have done much anyway. They stated that searching the woods would be unfeasible given its vastness, and insisted that simple security cameras would have averted the entire incident. My dad later discovered that the person on the roof had been attempting to dig into our attic, much like an animal would. Ironically, it wasn't my dad or I who were most affected. It was my mum. She cried about this incident countless times, and she was actually the one who proceeded to upgrade our home security. I still have no explanation for what transpired that night. Who that man was, where he came from, and how he even found our house are just a few of the thousands of questions about that night that I fear will never be answered. My house has a very unique design. Well, I call it unique, but I bet many people would consider it weird instead. And in fact, they have. The vast majority of friends I've hosted have all expressed this. Even a handful of girls I've secretly brought in while my parents were away. As much as I'd love to simplify things for myself and just include a bunch of photos of the house, I don't think my parents would appreciate that too much. So instead, I'll just convey the important details. As it pertains to this story, there's really only one crucial piece of information you need to know. You know how most houses feature a porch or a walkway leading up to the front door, and there's usually some sort of covering above the door, perhaps called a door canopy? Well, my house essentially has a covered hallway that you must traverse before entering the actual interior. Imagine your own front door, with parts of the house on either side, and then envision the front door entrance being set back into the house, so to speak. It's essentially like walking between two sections of the house without actually being inside yet. All of this is to say that my bedroom is on the first floor, directly adjacent to the external hallway that leads to the front door. If I stand up and look out the window next to my bed, I can actually see anyone standing at the front door, though their back would be facing me. Hopefully that description clarifies things. From a very young age, I developed a habit of peeking out that window whenever a delivery person or a guest would ring the doorbell. It was like having a small hidden camera that I could use to verify who was there before stepping into full view of the door. What I'm about to recount happened just a few months ago, at the very beginning of the summer. With my parents away for the week, I seized the opportunity to have my girlfriend Anna stay over for a few days. My typically strict and traditional parents would never approve of such an arrangement, but what they didn't know wouldn't harm them. Besides, they knew Anna well, so it wasn't as if I were bringing a complete stranger into our home. The first night passed without much incident, just a relaxed evening of movies, snacks, and some wine. We went to bed at a reasonable hour and enjoyed a swim in the pool the next morning. Neither Anna nor I are big partygoers, so we were perfectly content spending our time together, relaxing, playing games, and watching TV. However, things took a turn on the second night, probably around midnight. As we lay in bed, whispering before falling asleep, I heard a sound from outside, a screeching or dragging noise. I hushed Anna and strained to identify it. It seemed to come from the driveway, located to the side of the house. This was particularly alarming because it meant the sound was very close to the building. After a moment, I identified it as one of my dad's trash cans being moved. He sometimes leaves them in front of the garage, and I was sure I'd seen a couple there earlier that day. My initial thought was that he hadn't fully emptied them, and an animal was rummaging for scraps. Still, animal or not, sounds in your driveway are eerie, especially when you're alone and it's too dark to see anything. I told Anna to stay put, explaining that I was going to shoo away whatever animal was raiding the trash. Then I calmly walked to the front door, flipped on the exterior lights, but they only illuminated the front yard and porch, not the driveway sufficiently. Reluctantly, I opened the door and stepped outside, hoping my presence would scare off whatever was there. I stood on the porch for a few seconds, listening for scampering or an animal fleeing, but there was nothing. Even the noise from the trash can had ceased. I considered the slim possibility that it had already run off, but concluded it was unlikely, since I had been watching and listening intently. Even more reluctantly, I turned on my phone's flashlight and began descending the front steps toward the driveway. As I drew closer, I saw that one of the trash cans had indeed been disturbed. Two were against the garage door, but one was completely overturned, its contents strewn across the driveway. I groaned, knowing I'd have to clean it up. I should mention that I still saw nothing, even upon closer inspection, assuming the animal had slipped away unnoticed. To be certain, I shone my flashlight all around the trash cans, but still nothing. That confirmed it. Without further thought, I started collecting the rubbish from the driveway and tossing it back into the can. Once finished, I went back inside, opened the garage door, moved the trash cans in, and locked up, not wanting to risk anything returning later and waking me. Then I returned to bed. Anna was awake, but barely. Sensing she was about to fall asleep, I gently kissed her forehead and tried to settle into my side of the bed without disturbing her. I was in that half-dream state between consciousness and sleep, where I could pull myself out if I concentrated. That's when I heard something. A faint tapping noise, like metal on glass. I was convinced it was part of my half-dream, but something about it was just unsettling enough. Instead of giving in to exhaustion, I opened my eyes and looked around the room. The tapping sound continued. I froze. It wasn't in my head. It was coming from somewhere in the room. I didn't move a muscle, just listened, trying to pinpoint its exact origin and nature. After a few seconds, I realized it wasn't coming from inside the room at all, despite how clear it sounded. That could only mean one thing. It was coming from just outside my window. I forced myself out of bed, slowly stood up, and peered behind the curtain of my bedroom window. In the dim outdoor light, I could make out the silhouette of a person standing at the front door, their back to me. It was terrifying. I watched for a moment longer and realized they were lightly tapping on the glass repeatedly, as if expecting someone to answer. But that was absurd. It was past midnight, and none of the house lights were on. I tried to discern more details about the person, but without more light, I couldn't see anything distinctive. As I stood there watching them, I saw them begin to turn. Without thinking, I ducked out of sight just in time, my heart pounding. I must have remained crouched behind the window for a full minute, terrified they had seen me. I didn't want to look again, but I had to. Taking a deep breath, I gathered my courage to peek out the window once more. Slowly, I stood back up, pulled back the curtain, and instantly regretted it. There, just 2 inches from the glass, was a face staring back at me. I yelled and recoiled from the window, yanking the curtain shut again. Even though our encounter was only for a split second, I could tell it was a man with shriveled-looking skin, as if his face was melting. As I stumbled backward onto the bed, still yelling uncontrollably, I woke Anna. I screamed that there was someone outside, then made sure my bedroom door was locked before grabbing my phone and calling the police. The officers arrived a little over 10 minutes later. Anna and I remained locked in my room the entire time. I desperately wanted to run to the front door to see where the creep had gone, but Anna clung to my arm and wouldn't let me. When the police finally arrived, I let them inside and recounted everything I had seen. They conducted a quick sweep of the house, and with my help, we confirmed there were no signs of forced entry, and the entire house was securely locked. That eased my mind somewhat, but it still didn't explain why that man was lurking around my house, or where he had vanished. Eventually, after walking the perimeter with their flashlights and searching the yard, they reported finding nothing unusual. One of them told me to call back if I saw the man again, and then they left. The rest of the week passed without incident. I ended up telling my parents, who, to my surprise, didn't seem overly concerned. We don't live in a sketchy neighborhood, so I was surprised by their nonchalant reaction. To be fair, though, their reaction made me feel like I might be overreacting a bit. I mean, what had truly happened? Some homeless man had crept around our house? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I might be making a mountain out of a molehill. But if that were the case, I probably wouldn't be writing this. The reason I'm writing this now is because for the past few nights, I've been waking up randomly in the middle of the night to strange noises coming from outside my window. Not my trash cans moving around like what I had heard before, but different sounds. I told my dad about them, and he's actually planning on installing security cameras around the perimeter of our house. But still, I can't help but feel like that guy showing up at my house wasn't a one-off thing. If anything else happens, I'll be sure to send a follow-up. What you're about to hear is an experience that nearly drove me insane. It's still something I think about quite often, honestly, but I've managed to recover somewhat in the months since it happened. The whole story is fairly brief, so I'll get straight to it. I'm a single man in my mid-30s. I live alone, without pets, in a small one-story house. The house is quite modest. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a living room, kitchen, dining room, and a tiny garage. That's all. Life is fantastic. Due to my profession, I can work on my own schedule and am accountable to no one. Not a girlfriend, parents, or an employer. Freedom has always been an essential part of my life, so I've strived to maximize it whenever possible. I know many people are different, and some might even judge me for my immature lifestyle. But everyone has different priorities and preferences. So, as long as no one judges me, I won't judge them. However, this excessive freedom definitely comes with its own set of drawbacks. I've developed some bad habits that I'm sure some people would disapprove of. One of them is my sleep schedule, which is utterly terrible. For some reason, I'm most productive during the late hours of the night. So I often find myself staying awake until dawn and sleeping into the afternoon. It's just how my body functions, and until I'm absolutely compelled to, I see no reason to change anything. I was up unusually late one night. I'm talking past 3 a.m. Late. I was at my desk, getting some work done on my computer. I was completely in the zone, not even listening to music. Imagine yourself at your most productive hours. That's the kind of groove I was in. The room was utterly still, and I was engrossed in my thoughts, accompanied only by the rhythmic click of my keyboard as I worked. Suddenly, without warning, the profound silence shattered. Footsteps thudded rapidly down the corridor towards my bedroom, followed by 3 or 4 deafening bangs on the door. The kind of forceful impact one might expect as police attempt to breach a drug den. I sprang from my chair with such speed that I struck my knee on the desk and knocked over my monitor. I was utterly stunned, caught completely unprepared. Imagine being alone in your house at 3 a.m. in absolute quiet, only to have it abruptly broken by violent pounding on your door. It was, and remains, the most terrifying incident I have ever experienced. My initial reaction was to stand up, but afterward, I became completely paralyzed. My eyes were fixed on the door, dreading the impending moment I felt certain was coming. The door bursting open, someone barging into my room, forcing me to confront a complete stranger in the pitch-black darkness. Yet, it never happened. I heard nothing further. Not even the sound of footsteps retreating from the door. It was as if I had imagined it, but I was absolutely certain I hadn't. I cannot recall how long I stood there, physically unable to move, as if experiencing sleep paralysis, though I hadn't been dreaming. Then, finally, I heard the rapid footsteps returning down the hall. So, someone had indeed been there. For some reason, hearing those footsteps again